In this second session of Module 1, we'll find out about autism. What does autism mean? What causes it? And how does it affect children? So let's begin. Autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder. What that means is that the way the brain develops in children with autism is somewhat different, and that affects their development. Now, the brain develops differently because of genes, which are different from the usual genes that children have. Not all the genes, just a small number of genes. And because of that difference, the brain is formed differently. And because of that, the child perceives and experiences the environment differently. So the child's developmental trajectory is different from the typically developing children. So in autism, multiple genes, about 100 genes, have slight difference in them from the usual genes. Now, these genes can be different if fresh in a person, or they can be inherited differently. Now, because of these minor changes in a number of genes, the brain is affected. And the brain is affected in two ways. The cells in the brain, or the neurons, are somewhat different, and the connectivity between these neurons is also somewhat different. Now, because of these two differences, the brain functions slightly differently. And because of that difference, the child perceives and experiences the environment differently. And the child functions and behaves differently. Their communication is somewhat different. Their interaction with others is somewhat different. And their behavior and learning is altered. So the question, what causes autism? It's clear that autism is a genetic condition. It's caused by slight differences in certain genes. It's not caused by parenting or diet or social circumstances. Now, it'll be wrong to blame one or the other parent for these differences. And it'll be wrong for the parents to blame themselves for the child's autism. Autism affects three main areas of development, often referred to as the triad. But these effects are to a different degree in each child. First of all, the way the child communicates, the way the child says any words or talks or uses gestures or initiates communication or responds to communication. Now, these differences can be different in each child. As I said, one child may be not talking at all, while the other child may be using words, but somewhat unusually or unusual type of words. Or another child may actually be talking in sentences, but has great difficulty in having conversations. The second area is the way children socially interact with others. Now, again, each child is affected to a different degree. Some children with autism have no interest in interacting with others, and they don't even respond when others interact with them. Other children with autism actually show interest in interacting with others, but when they need something. Now, another child with autism may actually interact with family members and with close friends quite well, but may get stuck when the child has to interact with a new person or a stranger, or interact in a new situation or with groups of people. And the third area of difference is in autism, the way children with autism play, think, and imagine. Now, for many children with autism, the play becomes quite routinized, and they lack the ability to play imaginatively. Some children with autism insist on routines. Things have to happen in a certain way. Or they show many repetitive behaviors. They do things, the same kind of things, in the same way. Or they show unusual sensitivity to certain sensations such as light or sound, and are very upset by some of those sensations. A question is asked, when does autism start affecting the child? Autism, or the genetic difference of autism, affects the development brain before birth. And some of the core features in autism could be present quite early, from about 18 months onwards. But some features of autism may not be apparent till later in life. And that's an individual difference in children with autism that we see. The children presenting with different features and different features presenting at different ages. So how does autism affect children's development? That again varies with the child. Generally, it affects the way children make sense of the world, particularly the social world. the way they respond to other people, and the way they learn. Generally, there is a slowing down of the development as well. It also affects their behavior and their participation in day-to-day activities. So the question is asked, do the effects of autism, or does autism change with time? Yes, it does. All children change, and so do children with autism. Children with autism learn new things, they learn new ways, they work out certain ways of communicating and interacting, and they change. The more they learn, the more they change. Do children with autism have other difficulties as well? Yes. And one of the major associated difficulty is the difficulty of learning, intellectual disability or learning disability. And about 3/4 of people have that kind of disability. So not every child, and even those who have difficulties of learning, have it to a different degree and about different sorts of learning. So it'd be wrong to assume that children with autism have difficulties of learning. Each child deserves a chance, each child deserves a proper assessment, a learning assessment, to work out the areas of need for the child. The other coexisting conditions include poor attention and hyperactivity. And some children have attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. The two things coming together is actually quite common, and one should keep an eye on that, whether the child has just autism or autism and something else with it. Some of the other common difficulties with autism are the unusual patterns of movement and posture. And many other children with autism have difficulties of eating, drinking, sleeping. Actually, sleep problems are very common and affect a child's life quite severely, and difficulties of mood and challenging behavior. So it's not just autism that's affecting the child. Many other things that are coming with autism to a different degree in the child can affect them. The spectrum of autism. What does the spectrum mean? So every child with autism is different and unique. If you have seen one child with autism, you have only seen one child with autism. The other child with autism is going to be different. The other thing is that autism affects different aspects of development to a different degree in each child. So there is no point assuming that these children are the same. People used to think of the autism spectrum in a way that some children are less autistic and some children are more autistic. And that's what it means, autism spectrum. But that's not true. What autism spectrum actually looks like is that there are different areas of functioning, such as language, executive functioning, the way we monitor our behavior, perception, the way that we perceive what's happening around them, sensory behavior, the way children are affected with sensations, and motor skills. And there are many other areas. And each of these is affected to a different degree in the child. There's one child who could have very good language and could have good motor skill, but have very poor executive function and difficulties in perceiving and a lot of sensory issues. There's another child whose language could be quite poor and their motor skills could be quite unusual and poor. But their executive functioning could be good and their perception could be affected. The way they perceive, the way they learn could be affected. But they may not have that many sensory difficulties. So each child could have a different combination of these areas. So just saying that a child has autism is obviously not enough. It doesn't give the right information about the child. One has to create a profile of the child's abilities, strengths, and needs. And that's when we understand what are the child's strengths and where does the child need help. Well, now you have done this second session of the module 1 about understanding autism. And so the next step is to go to the next session, which is about obstacles to overcome for children with autism. Because once you understand about the obstacles that autism creates for the child, you'll be able to find the workaround to help the child. So let's go to the next session.